This is Tito Santana. You're listening to another wrestling podcast. Arriba!
Jonathan, I'm sick of the internet. It's ruining wrestling for me. I want to be surprised. I can't be surprised when I'm reading the dirt sheets every day.
Well, don't read the dirt sheets.
But that's what I do. I need to know what's happening. But at the same time, I don't want to know what's happening.
I'm going to start my own website and secretly not tell you about it. And then I'm going to just give you false spoilers until you decide to quit reading the internet.
Well, that's just not going to work because now I know you're going to secretly start another site, and anything I read now, I'm just not going to believe.
Well, that's probably good, but you'll see something that says like King Kong Bundy, new world heavyweight champion, and you're going to click on it, and then you're going to get it. You're going to get shocked and surprised when you find out that King Kong Bundy is not, in fact, the world heavyweight champion.
That's because he should be the world heavyweight champion, because nobody kicks out of the 5 count.
You hear that, King Kong Bundy?
It's time for another wrestling podcast with your hosts Steve Credo and Jonathan Benjamin.
Everybody, it is time yet again for another wrestling podcast. Episode number 3. We are chugging right along. Is it 3 or is it 4 now?
We're on 4 now. See that?
We are on 4. That is number 4. It follows 3, but it is number 4, everybody. So, Quattro. You know, it's just going by so quickly, and last time that you joined us, we had tons of guests. Today is no different. We have a very special guest, and before we get into that, I just want to have everybody who is listening to us know that if you're listening to us on here, that's one way to really, learn about us and find out what's going on. But there's so many other ways.
That's right. Because we're in the social media verse. That's how people know about anything these days is the damn internet. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. I mean, right, Jonathan? All you got to go to is facebook.com/ what are we? Another wrestling podcast. That's it, man. How easy is that? And the only other thing about Twitter is that I couldn't fit the whole name, so I had to think of something clever. So we're at a wrestling pod, a wrestling pod, another wrestling podcast. So, we're everywhere, Jonathan. I'm pretty sure if you just go to Google and search another wrestling podcast, you'll find us on iTunes. You'll find us on Stitcher. We're everywhere. That's the greatest thing about social media is that there's 20,000 different places and we're all there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on Podbean, I'm pretty sure too.
That's exactly right. That's where we are being thrown out into the iTunes universe from Podbean. It's hosting our show. So that's, you can find us there too. If
you tune in next week, we may be on Green Bean. It's even newer than Podbean. I don't think that exists.
Hey, we can even just find Friendster again and maybe just start a MySpace account, because if we're going to do it, we got to start from the beginning.
Absolutely.
I don't know. But yeah, basically, all in all, we're out there. Check us out, like us, rate us, click us, follow us, poke us, friend us, whatever you want to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we don't really mention a lot, but we are actually on Twitter ourselves. You can follow me at Limousine Riding, and you can follow him. I'm pointing to you.
At
Credo.
That's it, man. Yeah, we're everywhere, including our show. So without our show, we're still on the social media verse. So, Hey. But basically, we just want to get that out to you guys, because if you're listening, that's how you can listen to more shows and keep clicking and liking us and whatnot. So, hey.
You know what, though? We try to do this show every week. We're getting a lot more guests. We're, trying to really put ourselves out there. But we're unlike any other type of pro wrestling podcast that's out there right now. We don't just tell you about what's going on Raw or SmackDown or NXT or TNA or ROH or HOH or NEW or any of those. though we may sometimes if we get breaking news or anything like that. But what we like to do is we're the Thinking Man's Wrestling Podcast, is or woman, really. If you're listening, God bless you. If you're a woman and you're listening to us. But we go out there and we interview some maybe like the unsung heroes of the world of professional wrestling, and we really try to just dive into things that maybe topics that aren't really talked about a lot. So, with that being said, Credo, and you've ranted and raved enough about the internet this morning or this afternoon or whenever we're doing this. See, I need to do over, but. Regardless,
but you told us we're going to have a guest today. I want to know who the guest is before I click off and go to another wrestling podcast.
Well, since you asked so nicely, our guest this week is none other than, and I'm pretty sure that this is probably the only time we'll be able to say this. I could be wrong though, but our guest this week is New York Times best-selling author Brian Shields. Now, I interviewed Mr. Shields a couple weeks ago, and we're just getting able to put him onto the podcast. Now, in true Sin Cara fashion, I'm pretty sure that my mic was hot or there's some echoing or whatever, but you're just going to have to power through that because I'm new at all this stuff. So the audio is still good. You'll definitely listen, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We talk about everything, including his new book, which is 30 Years of WrestleMania, and we talk a lot about that. So stick around for that. But before we get into that, Credo, I myself am a lifelong wrestling fan. I know yourself also. Before the days that we had, the dirt sheets that you were talking about and spoilers and everything, I was a big, huge fan of the actual pro wrestling magazines. Did you have this sort of thing going on, or? Yeah,
I actually have I don't have a claim to fame, but the WWE magazine back in the 80s. I don't know if you remember this. I'm going to throw this out there, but I'm not in it. My parents are in it, but here's the thing. I don't know if you remember, they used to have this WWE warehouse. I forget where it was, what exactly it was, but basically we went to this WWE warehouse and you stood online like it was, like no joke, like there was like a roller coaster or it was a theme park. Like we waited there for like over an hour or two, maybe 3, and I remember it was hot. We're standing there online. We were online, and you didn't know who you were going to meet because there was going to be superstars inside. You can get merchandise and whatnot. Long story short, we met the Bushwhackers later on, and then I think, they kept changing superstars in and out, but we were there all day waiting online. The one time I step offline to go get like a soda or something with my brother, the one time I do that out of waiting for like hours online, they snap a photo, and it's of the line at the WWE warehouse. I don't know what magazine it's in. I have it somewhere. I have to find it, though. But you could see my parents online, and I'm so bummed because I would have been able to been in a WWE magazine. And that's where it all started, Jonathan, the WWE magazine. I mean, that's what got me into it because there was no internet back then. There was no going on Google, going to WWE.com, going to all your favorite dirt sheets or whatever. It was magazines. That's how we found out things. That's how, that was the information we were getting. And I don't know about you, but I mean, WWE Magazine was the first magazine for me. Then it led to like Pro Wrestling Illustrated pretty much and all those other ones. But I don't know. What about you? That was my little claim to fame, but even though I wasn't in it.
The crazy part about that is there's a couple things that I have to mention here. Obviously, I'm not from the Northeast originally. I'm from Indiana. So it takes a little bit of time for things to get to Indiana. It's coastal, so it comes from either the West Coast or the East Coast and kind of settles right there in the Midwest. So the WWF magazine was pretty much the only magazine that we got out there, and I pretty much read it religiously. I think at a couple points I had a subscription, but I really like to just go to the store and I would buy, a magazine or whatever, and I just couldn't wait to see the cover every month. Who was on the cover? Maybe there was, like.
Yeah, I mean that was it.
I do remember that Virgil made an appearance one time. Do you remember the Virgil? Do you remember the Virgil cover?
No, I don't remember the Virgil cover, but I mean that was the thing. Like as a kid, you wanted to see who was going to be in the next cover. You know, that was great because you didn't have that much technology back then, right? You know, you had just the magazines, and once a month that was your thing. You know, to find out any information or what's going on. You know.
Yeah, and you never realized like how much went into the WWF's magazine at the time because, you know, they had the catalog in the center where I used to, yes, I would send off for like a T-shirt or whatever, but like you have to realize that they have to be a couple of months ahead of whatever they're doing because if they had a surprise or something like that, then it wouldn't make that month's issue. So say the Gobbledygooker was set to hatch at Survivor Series, well, no one would know unless, you know, it was in that magazine. So I definitely had that. I made mistakes throughout my life where I sold off part of my collection or all of my collection or whatever. But like, I remember being so happy. I went into a thrift store one time in Southern Indiana and found like a stack of WWF magazines, and it was like the greatest thing ever. And I remember the one magazine that was on top. I can tell you this right now. It was the cover of Bart Simpson and Bret Hart.
Wow, man, it's such memories though. I mean, those magazines, I don't even know what I have, but I do remember having, I think I met Shawn Michaels just when he started to go solo, and I had nothing for him to sign as a kid, you know, like you didn't have like all these Mark stores and shops online and stuff, so I was like, you either get an 8x10 somewhere at the autograph signing or you bring your WWE magazine, and that's what I did. I brought my magazine where it had like an article of, you know, HBK turning the you know, the new Heartbreak Kid gimmick, and that's what I had him sign, and I still have it to this day. That's it, man. That's how it got people hooked. Like, it's amazing how, you know, like today they still have it, but it's not as what it used to be. You know what I mean? It's such a big deal with the magazines.
Well, what's crazy too is that, like we mentioned, if you think about the inception of the WWF magazine, I think the very first, someone will definitely tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the very first WWF magazine it's either Sergeant Slaughter or Jimmy Superfly Snuka. So I'm pretty sure that that's, you know, one or two of the other. But then all the way up, it went from, you know, Hogan was on the cover, and like I said, Virgil, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Psycho Sid, all these people were on the cover of this magazine. Nowadays, I'm a huge collector of the WWE magazines, and we get about, they just bounce back and forth between about 5 guys. So it's either John Cena, Rey Mysterio, Orton, Undertaker, or Triple H, and so that's pretty much your cover stars right now.
Yeah, man, and like think about it though. Like as growing up, like these were our dirt sheets. You know what I mean? Like even though they weren't really dirt sheets, but it was our gateway, or so to speak, into, you know, getting us to the next WWE show, WWE Superstars or whatever back then. But then as you got older, I don't know about you, but me personally, like I started getting into the PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and then like they had the PWI 500, you know, the top 500 wrestlers. I started getting into that and like all those almanacs and like the, you know, I was so hooked on it because I just wanted to know who is number one this year or whatnot, you know, and it was interesting. That's how I found out a lot more about all these wrestlers before you could even get into like media, before you can get into like all these tapes and watch all these other guys. It was just interesting to see, you know, what was happening, and man, it's amazing how things have changed, you know, just from going from these magazines and you know, from simple WWE magazines to PWI magazines. I know there's tons of other you know, wrestling magazines out there, but those are the two big ones for me, PWI and WWE. I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I mean, those were so influential as a kid. I can't even imagine how kids growing up today, I don't even think they get into it as much as we have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think what's crazy about that is, it's like I said, since I'm from you know, Southern Indiana originally, is those magazines in the back, like PWI, they had, like, it was by state, so they had little blurbs about like pro wrestling in Alabama or Colorado or Delaware, or, you know, and they still do to this day. So without the internet, that was basically how you could find out what was going on in other states. So like maybe a small town promotion in Kentucky was running something, and I saw where Jerry Lawler fought maybe like Psycho Sid, and I was like, wow, that's a great match, and I wish I could learn more about it or whatever. Then maybe next month they would have something in the magazine, but that's just something that you could and they always had the ranking, like the top 10 wrestlers, the top 10 tag teams, top 10 women's wrestlers. So I liked it because it definitely gave it a little more like real feel to it.
Yeah, I loved reading about the results. I think that was the one thing I loved reading too, because I was curious of who was winning where and whatnot, and it was this is before YouTube. I feel like now we're dinosaurs, but it wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean? I remember reading like you were saying, matches that happened in other cities, and it was so cool because you kind of imagine what was happening all these other places compared to now where you can just go on YouTube and find it. Because pretty much everybody's recording it off their phones or whatnot. But I mean, that big chunk of the mystery behind it, what was happening, you're reading about it but you're not seeing it, is gone. And I don't know, I think as we got older now too, I don't know about you, I'm kind of into the books now, like the biographies and whatnot. So I mean, I don't know about you, but one of my all-time favorite books I've ever read was the Bret the Hitman Hart biography. And I know what you're going to say. I know I'm a Bret Hart mark, and no, and no, it's not because of that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong too, this was the first book away from, well, maybe one of the first books away from the WWE machine to where they weren't editing the book. This is Bret Hart writing his book with, somebody else, like a ghostwriter or whatever. And he told a lot of stories that WWE would have totally edited out. And I thought that I love the book. I've read it a few times now. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I read the book. I will say, even though I'm not a huge Bret Hitman Hart fan, that book read really quickly. So if you haven't ever read that book, go out and get it. I mean, it's a big book, but you can. It's like a conversation almost. It's just a really long conversation. So yeah. That's a good book. I mean, there's so many that are out there now that are really good and also kind of peel back. We were talking earlier, this is now kind of the reality era. So everybody wants to hear about that dirt or, what did somebody do to somebody else or whatever. But there's a lot of really good biographies out there. Some are produced by WWE and some are, off the radar, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing with me. I mean, don't get me wrong, the WWE biographies are good too, but when you read it, you're you're hearing what you kind of figure you're going to hear, I think, in my way. But I mean, when I was reading Bret Hart's book, there was just things he was saying in there that you knew, crap. Somebody was saying, why didn't they edit this out? And that was cool. That's what was cool about it, you know what I mean? Is that it wasn't being censored. Andre the Giant's book kind of sucked to me because it was almost it wasn't written by him. It wasn't really a story. It was mostly just a timeline of what he did and whatnot. And that one, the Shawn Michaels book I read, the Eric Bischoff book, all by WWE. It kind of just, when you're reading it, you're not getting as much out of it, I thought, as you were getting from the Bret Hart book. And I know this is turning into an infomercial for the Hitman book. We're going to have it in our own merch shop pretty soon. But, I don't know. That's where we went from, though. We went from the book. We went from the magazines. We got older. We started reading these biographies that interest us in the superstars we love. And, it's missing today because the internet is killing the world, I think, with all this mystery. What do you think? I mean, from the magazines, the books, what's your take on it?
I don't know how to explain this other than just say that I think that pro wrestling has reached another level again where it's really, really cool. And a lot of people don't really, it's the era for the smart fans, like I said. So you have all these T-shirt stores popping up, and you have kind of alternative art forms of professional wrestling, whether it be prints or artwork like Rob Schamberger or any of these things. And I just saw this book, and it's by a guy named Box Brown, believe it or not, and it's called The Life and Legend of Andre the Giant. And what he does is he goes back and tells famous Andre the Giant stories, but he does it in like cartoon or comic book fashion.
Oh yeah.
So the book's like $17.99. I found it at Barnes and Noble, and it's a very quick read, but it's really cool. So you should definitely check that out. But that's what I'm saying. We're getting that sort of stuff now, whereas before, like you said, if it wasn't through WWE or whatever, then we may not have heard about it. But it's kind of a good segue too, because before we started talking to this, I started talking about Brian Shields, and when I was talking to him, you start to realize that WWE didn't really have a written historical record on their product. And as of late, he's done some really good books. He's done Main Event, Raging 80s, like it talks about the complete, time of the 80s with WWF.
Mm-hmm.
The WWE 50 book just came out that talks about the 50 years of the WWE.
I gotta get that still, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. If you haven't, you should go out and definitely just check it out. And then also him and co-writer Kevin Sullivan, not the wrestler, the other one.
Other one.
They did both editions of the encyclopedia, which are just amazing. So I feel like we're getting there. Like the fans are finally our type of fans are finally getting what they want. They're getting some more content.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing is granted, I'm not a big book person. I'll tell you that right now. Like I'm looking at my shelf right now, and I'll tell you some of the books on my shelf. I have the Bret Hart book. I have Mankind book. I have the Shawn Michaels book. Long story, I got a George Carlin book in there too. Long story short, I got a Chris Jericho one. A lot of them are wrestling biographies. That's my library. I love biographies, and I love, just reading about the people I loved, growing up, my heroes and whatnot. And I'll tell you what, the encyclopedia with Brian Shields coming up, I bought that book a few years ago, just that, not on a fluke, but I was like, this is cool, I'm going to buy it. And then little did I know, I ended up using that book as my, autograph book. I have Hogan in there, Bret Hart, oh geez, I don't know. I got a lot of people. Ultimate Warrior I have signed in there. Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Mick Foley. The list goes on, and it's like it goes back to when I was talking about the magazines, to where, oh man, I have nothing in my room to get him to sign. What am I going to get him to sign? I'm going to this book to have him sign it, and it just turned out into a big autograph book for me. So a lot of people have been doing that too. A lot of people have been using it to get signed, and I don't know if Brian knows that, but I hope we're not ruining what he worked hard on to make. But people have to realize that it's a good read, and it's also a good collector's item to where you can get signed by everybody.
Well, in the business, like we say, that is a perfect segue, because if you listen to the interview, you will hear all about what he thinks about the encyclopedia, what he thinks about all the projects he's been involved in. And I think that I may have twisted his arm a little bit to find out some information about some upcoming things that he's working on, that he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes. So there's some special stuff in there. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today on another wrestling podcast. And we would like to welcome our guest, WWE New York Times best-selling author, Brian Shields. It's certainly not every day that we have a New York Times best-selling author here. So thank you for joining us. And how you been?
Jonathan, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here. Everything's been going great. Just been very busy over the last year plus working with WWE and DK Publishing on the new book that I have written that was announced last week, 30 Years of WrestleMania.
Now, we here at Another Wrestling Podcast would love to tell you all about the book. We're going to be asking Brian Shields some questions about the book. It is going to be amazing, as all of his work has been. If you're a fan of the WWE Encyclopedia, WWE Main Event, that book as well, it's similar to those books. And right now you can pre-order this book, which whenever I was talking to Brian earlier, I had told him that I was pre-ordering it right then. And if you want to know where you can pre-order it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. You can pre-order at IndieBound and also at GameStop. So we'll have the website up, and we'll also tell you more about the book. But if you are talking about the book on social media, please be sure to use the hashtag 30 as in 30, YO as in yo, and then WM as in WrestleMania. So, Brian, I just want to get right into this, and I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that you're a huge fan of professional wrestling. So what are some of your earliest memories of wrestling in general, and like who were your fan favorites as a child?
Well, I was a huge fan of professional wrestling from really early childhood. I grew up on Long Island, and being a kid of the '80s, Long Island was one of the first parts of the United States that had cable television. So for me, my introduction to professional wrestling first came with WWE, and then I would see the Von Erichs and World Class Championship Wrestling on ESPN, Vern Gagne's AWA also on ESPN. That was usually during the week at 4 p.m. on ESPN. And then through Superstation WTBS, we would see Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then later Jim Crockett Promotions, what ended up becoming WCW. We even saw in the late 80s on Sports Channel Angelo Savoldi's International Championship Wrestling. And one of my favorite shows actually was on WPIX, and that was called Pro Wrestling This Week, which was a great kind of like a Sports Center style wrestling recap show with Gordon Soley and Joe Pedicino.
I think that's something that maybe they're missing on the network. They have the This Week in WWE, but I mean, to have Gordon Soley, that would be pretty amazing. I mean, just his voice is amazing. So. Oh
yeah, without a doubt. But so for me, and at that time also, Jonathan, I mean, the 1980s, you start getting into the mid and late 80s. I mean, that was really the boom of like the wrestling magazines and the home video lines, especially with WWE and Coliseum Home Video. So it was, from very early on, I mean, in writing the 30 Years of WrestleMania book, it kind of put things in perspective for me. I was 6 years old when the first WrestleMania happened. So, my favorites were in WWE. I was a huge Hulkamaniac as a kid. Loved Superfly Snuka, the British Bulldogs. I mean, I could stay on your show all night probably talking about all my favorites, because either I loved to cheer them, or like Roddy Piper at the time, I just loved booing them, on the edge, sitting on the edge of my mother's couch.
I'm just glad to talk to somebody who's just as passionate as we are about, pro wrestling in general. And, you mentioned your book, Main Event, WWE in the Raging 80s. And for those of you who haven't picked this up yet, it's a great book. It's almost like a textbook in a sense, because it chronicles what we all have talked about as being the most important timeline in not only WWE's history, but professional wrestling history. My question to you is, have you thought about taking this idea a step further and maybe doing other, decade books?
Well, that's a great question. I'm very grateful for my working relationship with WWE and DK Publishing. That first book was through Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
There are some other book ideas that I have that I'm working on right now, but nothing nothing that I could talk about. But that, let's just say that idea has been discussed.
That's great. So let's just let's just all pretend that we don't know how this all works, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about, you've written several books that are just completely wildly popular among wrestling fans.
Thank you.
Oh no, I mean, this is anybody that I talk to, we go to lots of shows and stuff, and it's not a secret that your books are, out there, and they are a great resource. I did several things, research papers or whatever in college, and you're the one to go to, because that's really all the history that's being written right now is through you, and that's great because it's such a good read. They're all great reads. But how does, like, when you get an idea like you were talking about, what's exactly the process to get it from your mind, let's say, to the finished product?
Well, every writer has their own style, kind of like every superstar and diva has their own style in the ring. Every writer has his or her own style. So, and some ideas come differently than others. For me, one of the things that I do, whether I'm writing a one-word caption for a client or I'm writing a over 200-page hardcover book like this, is I write everything out first. So I have stacks and stacks of old school marble notebooks, and I just start writing. And based on that is then usually you want to at some point get into an outline and then start really flushing it out as to what's called a concept document. And actually, I started out in the video game business, and so that helped me, and I didn't know it at the time, but that really helped me get an understanding of the importance of a concept document, the ability to communicate with people of all different levels of understanding of pro wrestling, understanding of the publishing business, things of that nature. So that's really where things go for me. And then I just start going, sample chapters are important, but for me, it all starts with the idea, writing it down on paper, and then flushing it out from there. That's always what I do. And to give you an example of that, even, I interviewed so many people for the 30 Years of WrestleMania book. And, people were telling me that there are these apps and programs where, you could basically, I guess the software does the transcribing for you. I wasn't interested in that at all, because for me, my process starts with that whole what I call, actually on Twitter, I call it the pen to paper movement.
Yeah, and that's something with the advent of technology these days. It's lost on a lot of people. So for you, you write these notes down, you're able to go back and reference these notes, and it shows in your writing. Your passion for the business really comes through on the pages. And
thank you.
And I think it's great. Now, typically when I ask this next question, when I'm talking to a wrestler or diva or whatever, I would ask them, who are some of your influences growing up? And they would tell me Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior or whatever. But do you have like any writing influences that you
Absolutely. First and foremost, my mother is probably my biggest influence. My mother was in the publishing business for over 25 years, first at Harcourt Brace in Manhattan and then at McGraw-Hill. And she's a writer herself. She's been published in the New York Times, New Yorker Magazine, several other outlets. And then for us, I loved people like Woody Allen, people like Neil Simon, just incredible storytellers, people that really, there was such an emphasis on the strength of the characters, strength of the story, strength of the dialogue. Those are the two that always jump out in my mind. And then I always remember, like, even going back to school, like, one of the summer reading books that I read in like 2 days was The Outsiders. And for your younger audience, that is not a reference to Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, but the incredible story, and then adapted into film by Francis Ford Coppola. So there were always a lot of different influences from a writing and film and television standpoint for me, which is why I think professional wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever you'd like to call it, has been such a great fit for me.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you're currently reading that you would like to, talk about, or anything, we're trying to, I feel like there's a stigma with pro wrestling fans in general that, it's lowbrow or redneck or hillbilly. And,
Right.
I'm from Indiana. You told me you grew up on Long Island. I recently have moved to Connecticut and have tons and tons of friends in the business, outside the business. And, it's great now because I think that the pro wrestling fan has evolved. And, I think that talking to you, and you're a New York Times bestselling author, that proves it right there. So
Well, well, thank you very much. First
no
of all, for me, the New York Times bestseller title is an honor. It was a dream come true, and that's all thanks to the opportunity from WWE and from DK Publishing. And then it's also a huge thank you to all the fans that have been, supporting the books that I've been writing, that come out to my events, and things of that nature. I do agree with you, though, Jonathan. I mean, I think that for a long time that there was a stigma to professional wrestling / sports entertainment, and I think that as time goes on, it's going away a little bit. And if I could speak to it just a moment, I think a big part of that in probably up until the last 10 or 12 years or so, is because there were people that worked in, the media, whether it was the news or newspapers or media outlets, who started out in the days of, Gorgeous George and Antonina Rocca, and where the business was really shrouded in a lot of secrecy, where it was almost like the worst kept secret that this was not a legitimate sport, yet no one ever came out and said that until, WWE did in the late 1980s. I think now, as the people that really grew up loving and watching it, especially during the 80s boom, have now grown up, and they're now in their own jobs, and also that WWE has evolved, and they've pulled the curtain back just a little bit to show people the sophisticated form of entertainment that this is. I think now people are starting to really, truly appreciate the challenges and the rigors of this form of entertainment that has no off season, that has a weekly program every week that's live, that now within, 4 months, has close to 700,000 subscribers on their own network, things of that nature. So I think things have evolved, and I think things are getting better in that regard as to WWE getting the credit that it deserves for being a form of entertainment.
absolutely. They're also, they're groundbreaking. They're a front runner. The world of professional wrestling is so vast, but it's very easy to get caught up in the spectacle of it. But watching, that was a great segue, because watching the network, you can go back and see things, and you can see them in their own time. So, for example, during the 80s, which is a big focal point of what we've been talking about this evening, is that you see the WWE was just merely mirroring what was going on in the world, and with the Iron Sheik and the Iran-Contra scandal, and you had your uber American Hulk Hogan fighting the evil, Iron Sheik. So I think that it's always been there where it could be taken seriously or as a form of entertainment, but something that people don't give it credit for, like you're saying. And you can even pull that forward to where when Muhammad Hassan was in the WWE, and there was a lot of uneasiness about after 9/11, and they bring this guy in, and it's not necessarily just because it's a hot button issue. It's a way for people to cope with these things. So I think the WWE is definitely a forerunner, and as far as all this stuff goes, they are the first to get it out there, and they should get some respect for that, actually.
Oh, absolutely. And, and I don't want to have any of your audience misunderstand what I'm saying. There have always been people that respected it as a business and form of entertainment and have appreciated the athletic skills that the men and women who perform need. I just mean that it's now becoming more widely accepted, whereas in the past, it was usually either the dedicated fan base or people that worked with WWE as a business partner, whether it was NBC, whether it was the original video game company that I worked at, Acclaim Entertainment, which had the first licensing rights to make WWE video games, or so on and so on. So yeah, it's definitely more mainstream now as far as an appreciation, and it should be.
Now, this next thing that I'm going to talk to you about, I don't know how familiar you are with it. I'm assuming that you're very familiar with it, but I go to lots of professional wrestling shows. My friends all go to lots of professional wrestling shows, and I have to say that the current encyclopedia, the first encyclopedia, I feel it's revitalized the entire independent wrestling circuit. Now what I mean by this is, I don't even know that you'll get the credit that you deserve, but the amount of money that book brings in, not that whenever it's sold in the stores, but the amount of money that people are getting from whenever I go to a signing and say Marty Jannetty's there, for example, and I have him sign the encyclopedia. He's in there several times, and maybe they'll charge one for every signature or whatever, but that book has single-handedly, I think, brought people's careers back. It's given them money. It's probably given them hope. And, I don't know that when you write books like this, you wrote the book because you're a fan, you're passionate about it, and it's something that you wanted to do. But did you ever think that this book could be a gateway to something like that?
Well, first off, anytime I talk about the WWE encyclopedias, either volume, I have to give a shout out to my co-author, Kevin Sullivan. Not the Taskmaster. I get that question a lot too.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, at the time, Jonathan, the goal was to create what was going to be put on the cover, the definitive guide to WWE. And, that was the goal, was to do right by the audience, to do right by the men and women that have performed in WWE. At that time, it was almost for 50 years. And to make the employees at WWE and the McMahon family proud. What has happened since, and I think the timing of it was a great coincidence, and I'm very happy when I hear this, is that it seems to have helped revitalize the autograph signing event business. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that makes me very happy, because that means that people are reading the books, they're enjoying them, and it also is shining a light on the men and women that have performed in that 20 by 20 ring. And, and I put it in the acknowledgement section of the book where, I thank them, because without their work, I don't have anything to write about, So it's something that I'm very proud of, and it makes me, it just makes me very happy to know that those books are so well received and that so many people are enjoying them.
Well, it's a very, very great book. The funny part about this is, and I don't know that I don't think I'm a last of a dying breed or anything, but when you're a fan of professional wrestling, whether it be the figures, the newest DVD, whatever it may be, and maybe this is also part of me coming from Indiana where there wasn't a lot of places where you could buy this stuff, but I like the thrill of the hunt, as I call it. I will go out to the store and actually look for the book or the DVD or whatever that may have came out on the Tuesday that I was looking for. So I actually went to 3 different locations trying to find the encyclopedia.
Wow.
The first day that I got the encyclopedia was like a Friday, and I looked through it like 5 or 6 times, and I couldn't believe the knowledge and all the hard work that was put in front of me. And I'm going through it, and I think the next week I went out to a signing, and it's probably it'd probably been out for 2 weeks at this point. But lo and behold, I go up to Mick Foley, who's the first person that I was going to get sign the encyclopedia.
Right.
And I hand him the book, and he had not seen the finished project. And so he's thumbing through it, looking at everybody from Abe Knuckleball Schwartz to, Lita or whoever he was looking at. And then he finally got to his, and he asked me, is it okay if I look through this? Because it was right about the time that I think that he had left the WWE. So he was shocked in a sense. I don't think that he thought that people were going to drag his name through the mud. But he was just in awe of the information that was put in front of him. And I actually had him sign it as Mick Foley, Dude Love, Cactus Jack, and Mankind. And he was very obliging. But it was just a great moment because, he got to read this for the first time. And I was the one that got to help him, see that. And I just don't know, like I said, that you guys will get the credit that you deserve. But I think it's probably done more for the business than you guys will ever know.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's one of those things where, and not to oversimplify it, and I think it's become cliche a little bit, but when you really love what you do, it's not a job, and you just want it to be the best it can be. And I remember during WrestleMania weekend at WrestleMania 28 in Miami, I did an appearance with Mick at the WrestleMania Reading Challenge. It was myself, Mick Foley, Alicia Fox, Hornswoggle, Rey Mysterio, and Dolph Ziggler. And, Mick actually said the same thing that you just did, or he alluded to it, that he was just very honored at the amount of space he was given in the book. And, this is one of the reasons why I love working with WWE. Anything that I've ever worked on with them, it's never been about, I guess, who's here and who's not at the time. Or who's doing this or who's doing that at the time. Is this accurate? Is this correct?
Yes.
And, when you think about it, the same could be said. That first encyclopedia came out in 2009. Hulk Hogan wasn't with WWE then. He had a full spread. So did Mick Foley, because it was the right thing to do for the project, and they deserved it for all of their contributions. So that is, as a writer, something that's very comforting to know, in that, the project is going to be what it needs to be, and you will receive all the assistance that you can in help making that possible, whether it's access to a video library or a photo archive. Or, Jonathan, I have to tell you, for 30 years of WrestleMania, I went to the WWE warehouse. I was in the vaults, so to speak, thanks to the WWE archivist. So, as a writer, that's a huge help, and it gives you a huge peace of mind knowing that you will have any and all assistance that you need to make the project the absolute best it can be.
That's I think that you probably had access to my questions earlier today, because I was just going to say that, have you gotten to meet the new WWE archivist? And could there be, and I know you can't really speak on this, but maybe if not, maybe me talking to you about this will get it going. But are there any plans to create like a pictorial history of WWE items, like caskets, Brutus Beefcake's shears, any of that stuff?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that I don't know. But I have to tell you, the work that the WWE archivist has been doing and is doing is phenomenal. It took all of my quote-unquote maturity as an adult and professionalism as a writer to not just go crazy at the warehouse. The stuff that is being preserved and being just set aside is absolutely incredible. They are doing phenomenal work, and I can't say that enough.
Yeah, and really what this is, the encyclopedia that you and Kevin Sullivan created is basically, from everything that I've seen and heard, is basically the only, written history record on the business. Now, with the archivist, this is, maybe years down the road or whatever, but with you guys' words and the actual, items in the collection, if there is ever a physical Hall of Fame, I mean, that's a no-brainer that both of those should be together, because it's just, that they should just be thankful that this is happening, and fans should be thankful. The network you're getting to see all of the pay-per-views ever. You're getting to see all these new shows and stuff, but really that's the things. I saw the archivist video about the ring. I was at WrestleMania 30, and I think WrestleMania 29, sorry. And the ring was heated, but I don't think anybody knew that. So they actually had somebody go out and create this ring in case it was so cold in New Jersey that, they could still wrestle. So it's just insane the amount of work that WWE puts together. But now with the archivist, with you guys' publications, it's just so much better than I think that they could have ever dreamed. So, real quick, I know you're a busy guy, and we're gonna talk real quick about your newest book. It's 30 Years of WrestleMania. It comes out September 15th in 2014 this year. Well, I mentioned earlier it's similar to the style of the encyclopedia, but what can your fans of your books expect from this newest book?
Well, the great thing about 30 Years of WrestleMania is that it is in the style. Visually, the style that everybody came to know and love from the WWE Encyclopedia. It is a little different in that, this is more of a flowing, almost like a story. I mean, you have the history of each WrestleMania, whether it's in the ring or behind the curtain. You have stories and insights from everybody from Vince and Linda McMahon to people that are behind the scenes as producers. There are special tribute sections to The Undertaker's streak, Shawn Michaels' career at WrestleMania, the Hall of Fame, and that's just naming a few. The book is 220 pages. It's hardcover, beautiful 4-color book, and it really is a description and history of WrestleMania that has never been told before.
That is it. I've seen the picture. There's a web page that we'll actually put up on our site later for everybody that's interested. But it's DK Publishing, so you can find it if you Google it or just type in 30 Years of WrestleMania. But the pictures that you have up there, the cover looks amazing. If if you pre-order, you get the exclusive Topps trading card, or is it in every book? Do you know?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
Well, regardless, I'm gonna say I may be wrong on this, but
I'll find out for you.
Okay, absolutely. But there is a incentive there that there is an exclusive Topps trading card if you're a collector, and it's of The Undertaker. Since we just covered the 30 years of WrestleMania, do you have maybe, I know it's hard. It's a hard question. It always is. But do you have a favorite WrestleMania?
Man, that is really hard. It's funny. For a long time, it was WrestleMania 3, whether it was Savage Steamboat or Hogan Andre. And then, I was at WrestleMania 25, and I saw Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, and that's probably the greatest match I've ever seen. I feel just incredibly grateful that I was there live to see it, but even watching it back, writing this new book, 30 Years of WrestleMania, and Sean says it himself. He said it for this book. And by the way, very quickly, the foreword of the book is from Shawn Michaels.
Oh, wow. That's enough reason right there.
Which is a huge deal. But, he says it in this book. He has said it in a lot of other interviews he's done, that it's probably as close to perfect as you can get. And, I think he's right. I've never, thankfully for everyone, I've never stepped through the ropes. But in, more than 30 years of watching this as a fan, it's probably the best match I've ever seen. And the story going into it was great. And the history of those two men is fantastic. And, the cool part, Jonathan, is that you get the match results, not just the listing, you get the match results of every match that happened in WrestleMania. So there is a history of this event that is just told in a different way, and the incredible style that DK has of putting these books together, combining the text and these beautiful photos, is really something that makes 30 Years of WrestleMania just a very special, commemorative book to own.
Yeah, and if you actually get on the DK, website, like I was saying, there are 3 sample pages right now that are up, and there's one that shows, a beautiful picture of WrestleMania 18. It gives you a little bit of insight into what's going on. The card, it tells everything from the date to the attendance. It's just chock full of information. And for someone like me and lots of other fans, they're going to be extremely excited about it. Like we said, it's coming out September of this year, September 15th.
September 15th.
And while we have you on here, everybody please go and follow Brian Shields on Twitter, and his Twitter handle is @It'sBrianShields. Just go and check out everything that he's got going on, and just I'm going to do it. Just thank him for being able to get this history out to us. It's not every day, and if you didn't notice that for a long time there was a drought in not only wrestling books or sports entertainment books, but good wrestling books and good sports entertainment books. So it's good to have these here as any reference. Like I said, I did papers in college about the history of the WWE, and there wasn't any real references. And so now I have it, and I think it's great. We want to definitely thank you, Brian, for being on our show. We'd love to have you back sometime. And, is there anything else that you want to tell people about, whether it's this book or anything that you got going on?
Well, first off, Jonathan, first thing I want to say is thank you for having me on. It's great to be on this show. I've been looking forward to coming on for a while once I heard that this was something that you started. And so that's first. Thank you for having me on. I talk about a lot of different things, whether it's wrestling, writing, sketch comedy. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. I talk about all this stuff 7 days a week at It's Brian Shields. And, 30 Years of WrestleMania is going to be awesome. To quote Gorilla Monsoon, it's going to be a happening this September 15th. It's coming out. I'm going to be doing book signing events around the country to support the launch of the book. I'm going to be doing a lot of things. So definitely at It's Brian Shields on Twitter is the way to keep up to date on that. And Jonathon, I got to tell you, I would love to come back on the show and talk about this a little more when the book is out.
Yeah, absolutely. We just barely scratched the surface of what you've done and what, just the world of professional wrestling in general. But like we talked about earlier, please just pre-order the book now. It's on Amazon.com. It's on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, IndieBound, and also at GameStop. I know that I just pre-ordered mine, so it'll be arriving, and I'll definitely let you guys know if you haven't got the book yet what to be looking for. But Brian, it's an honor to have you on here, and we at Another Wrestling Podcast just can't thank you enough. So thank you again. Until next time.
Thank you.
That was great stuff, Jonathon and Brian Shields. Appreciate your time and joining us. And Jonathon, I hope we get Brian on the show another day so we can sit and hammer him with some more questions. But thanks again to Brian Shields. Yeah, and if any of you who've listened to this want to follow Brian Shields on Twitter, it's at It's Brian Shields. Also, if you want any more information regarding his newest book, 30 Years of WrestleMania, you can find all that information out on Facebook.com/Another Wrestling Podcast. Awesome, man. What a show. I love talking about how we became marks in a way. I mean, from magazines and books to dirt sheets and all that stuff. I mean, it's interesting hearing from a New York Times best-selling author himself, Brian Shields, kind of his story too about it. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's always interesting to talk to somebody like that, but he's a great guy, and just at the end of the day, he is what I think of as just a huge fan, and I think that's the type of people that you want writing the history of the business that we love, is someone who's at heart just a big fan like us. And if you guys want to sponsor us too, don't forget, email us at anotherwrestlingpodcast@gmail.com, because this week we have none other than Extremely Talented Wrestling. That's ETW. This Saturday night, July 12th, you can see the Young Guns special. We have none other than Vic Delicious versus Dan DeMann versus Hale Collins. It's going to be a great show, guys. It's at the Bristol Boys and Girls Club. That's at 105 Laurel Street, Bristol, Connecticut. Be sure to check them out at facebook.com/extremely talented wrestling, and hope to see you at the show. They got a great show coming up. It's a local indie promotion. If you're listening to us and you're within drive, check it out, guys. Once again, Jonathon, I know I just want to run it into people's heads to where they can find us, because, I mean, we're in the social media verse, I'm calling it. That's what I'm going to probably say from now on. But, guys, please, if you love our show, like us at facebook.com/Another Wrestling Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at A Wrestling Pod, A Wrestling Pod. Search for us on iTunes. Give us a like, give us a few ratings, comment on us, tell us how much you love us, and if you hate us, it's if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. That's, whatever. But anyway, we're going to do this each and every week, because, Jonathon, next week, do you know who we have? Who do we have next week? All I'm going to say is he comes with a long piece of wood and a hoe. Well, I don't know. I didn't know how to really to say that. But No, I don't think there's any really better way to say that. You're obviously talking about Val Venus. Well, maybe on a future show, but no, we have none other than Hall of Famer Hacksaw Jim Duggan joining us next week, guys. So be sure to tune in, because he sure does have some words for a past WWE superstar. So we'll find that out, though, on
Another Wrestling Podcast.